It was about 1 year after my brother died in Haribo's horrible disaster. I was at Salmon's the Iron Toenails shop looking for something to help me to resurrect my brother. It's taken months and months, but then I found something new, and there it was. It said, for Michael Rosen. I wonder who put that there. And it was a map. So I took this map and I called it the Michael Rosen Map. It was made of magic paper, fantastic, and off I go. The shop owner, he had a moustache, and he said, "It's yours, my friend, as long as you have enough iron toenails." There was silence. All I had was a tomato and 15 monies. Everyone was looking at me. Then, suddenly, some guy in a black hood appeared. All his clothes were black, and he screamed, "Watch out, everybody, I'm gonna steal stuff." And he took this gold gun out of his pocket. I took the chance and bolted, whoosh, and straight away I was out the shop. Later that day, I had a look at the Michael Rosen Map. It said, once you find this map, you have to go to the island of the plums. And there was a little paper compass on the map, and it would move around with me. Magic. Anyway, this meant that I had to buy a ship, so I went to Southampton Harbour, and there it was, a fantastic ship. It was huge. First of all, I tried stealing it like a true pirate. So off went my roll, and it flew into the air and down onto the ship, right onto the mast. And I ran and began swinging towards it, and I jumped on the ship. Suddenly, the harbour security guard came in and said, "What are you doing?" Then I said, Suddenly, there was a man who turned up on the ship. All his clothes were black, and he shouted, "You can't catch me, I'm stealing this ship." It was then I noticed it was the guy in a black hood from the shop. I took the chance. I shouted out, "I'm stopping the thief! I am stopping the thief!" Then he shouted, "Good Lord!" And I ran. Then the guy disappeared in a flash. "Thank you for your help," said security guard. So I said, "Don't worry about it." So there I was again, but I decided no stealing. So I went to the salesman of the ship and said, "Hey, what do you want for your birthday?" Hey, what do you want for your ship? You know, that one over there. And he said, "Oh, it's you. Thanks loads for stopping the thief. So for you, it's not loads, but if you want it, you've got to have a crew with 5 people. Okay, yeah?" And that's when we get to the crew with hunting. So now I go and put notices all round the street saying that I'm going to the island of the plums. Fantastic. So now a man called David Alexander came to me and said, "I like it when you go to those places where they have those candy horses, you know, mad dogs. Can I join your crew with my little gang?" I said, "What do you guys bring to the table?" And he said, "It was really dangerous." Then I said, "Fair enough." So we had to get to the ship, but then David's little gang decided they wouldn't wait for me to tell them what ship to get on. And before we all knew it, David and his little gang were heading for Jamaica. Yeah, dangerous, useless. Not long after, a man called George Telly came in. He had 2 people with him called Mervyn and Harry, and they joined my crew. So including me, that makes 4. It was then someone with a helmet over his head came in and he said, "My name is Richard and I want to join you." So I said, "Okay, that makes 5. So we went to the salesman and he said, "Great, really great. This is wonderful. It is yours." Nice. And off we go. There we all were. So George said, "What's the goal?" Then I told my crew all about our quest. I was captain of a Galilean ship, the CaptainPlums. Look at that. George and Mervyn were standing at the helm with me, and we looked at the Michael Rosen Map. Mervyn said, "This is a long journey. Do we have enough food?" So I said, "If we don't, I shall roll you over or do." Just kidding. Of course we do. Anyway, after a few days of being at sea, Harry said, "Are we nearly there?" So I said, "No." "Shut up." George said, "Come on, Harry, why don't we go play your favourite game, Liar's Dice?" So he said, "Okay, playtime." Meanwhile, me and Mervyn were looking at Richard. He was standing on the main deck. Mervyn said, "I wonder why he's so quiet." And I said, I wonder who is under the helmet. And so it went on, day after day. But then, on day 10, George came upstairs with this really long telescope, and he said, "What's that?" So I took this telescope to look at it, so I closed one eye. It was then I noticed that another ship had appeared, a bit far away, on its own. Could be trouble. Then Richard came in, and he looks at us, and he says,
Okay then, guys, playtime's over.
Suddenly, Richard transforms into a really big mid-roll, but big trouble. Richard had this really long laser gun, so I screamed, "Quick, get out of here!" Richard's gonna kill us. There was an awful yelling and crying. There was the noise of laser guns. We ran, and all the time Richard was shooting laser at us. Suddenly, Richard shouted out,
Come back here, Michael Rosen, and heel over. You won't get very far.
I shouted out, "No, shut your big face." So there we all were, running for our lives. First of all, we tried hiding in the corner of the poop deck. We lay there. George said, "I don't believe it, I really don't. What do we do now?" Then I said, "I'll tell you what we do. When I run to the captain's cabin, you guys cover me. I'm going to get weapons. Do you understand?" So they go, I kept them, and off we go. And I ran and jumped from deck to deck. We juked and jived around that ship, and all the time Richard was shooting at us. Then I noticed Richard shot hundreds of holes into my ship. That wasn't very nice. I shouted out, "Would you believe it? Oh, he's gonna be in for big trouble. And the door's jammed, I'll have to break it down." Then I kicked down the door, slam. Straight away, I was inside the captain's cabin, and there they were, the pirate weapons. So I took the lid off his doors, and one musket, and the cutlasses. Then I noticed the pirate captain hat, so I took that one as well. Then I gave my crew the weapons, and off we go. And there's George, Mervyn, and Harry shooting at Richard like mad. And here's me, and I said, "Hey, Richard, come get it." So I began to aim at him with my musket and shot right in the head. And he looked at me all fed up, and he said,
Look, right, that's it.
Suddenly, Richard flew into the air, closer and closer towards me, and I ran and jumped on the mast, climbed up, and I kept shooting. Then, suddenly, Richard took me by the arm really hard. Oh no! And before we all knew it, Richard had pushed me towards the edge of the ship. It was then I looked down and saw the sharks in the water. They were watching me. Richard said,
One push, Mr. Rosen, and you'll be dead. So if it's up, it's over. You're gonna come with me.
Suddenly, George appeared with a cannon, and he said, "I don't think so, Richard boy," and he fired the cannon right at Richard. George said, "You haven't wet yourself, have you?" So I said, "Close, thank you, George." Anyway, after Richard fell into the water, the sharks took him down, and he disappeared into the sea. Suddenly, Mervyn came running, and he screamed, "Quick! The ship is sinking." No! But there's another problem, isn't there? If you remember, it was then we looked up at the sky and noticed the huge pirate ship floating in the air above us. Then the came down from the flying ship. Then they appeared, roll but pirate, loads. And before we all knew it, me and my crew were surrounded. It was then the roll but pirate in front of me stepped aside, and the roll but pirate captain came in. It was then I noticed a group of people coming in, and they were David and his little gang. "What?" I shouted out, "What the fuck, David Alexander? I thought you and your little gang were heading for some other place on your own." And he said, "Ha! The Haribo Company hired me and my gang to catch Michael Rosen in here, you hard." Then I said, "Why, you and David Alexander?" He said, "Consider it revenge. Just ask your parents, Michael." "Oh, I forgot. They will never see you again." "Right, okay then, roll but pirate. Lock these little shits up." David Alexander said, "Good. Now, my gang, let's report back to Agent Toenail Pizza." Then I said, "You won't get away with this." And off we go. sitting in our prison cells inside the robot pirate ship. I was so scared. Yeah, do you know, I got so sad and lonely I started talking to my tomato. But it didn't say anything. So sad. And there we were. They stuck us into the horrible cells on Skull Prison Island. Yeah, at least together in one place this time, so we could talk. So I said, hey everyone. George said, yeah, hey. And Mervyn said, hi. And Harry was pounding his head against the bars. George said, stop that, Harry. And he said, yeah, sorry. It was then we heard the door to our cell room open with two robot pirates coming in. They were talking to each other. Then they untied the sacks and dumped them into the prison cell each, while the new prisoners were still inside the sacks. Then a little cage went up as well, and there was a little sack inside the cage. It was then the robot pirate left. Suddenly we all heard a voice, and we looked to see what it was. And Mervyn said, what's that? So we looked to see. It was then we noticed something move in one of the cells, and it came closer to the bars. Then we could see it looked like one of the robot pirates. And he said, Then I said, what do you mean reactivate, and why are you in that cell? I see, but how come you're in here? I thought you were a robot pirate. George asked, you see here? That's a shame, but fair enough. Then I said, my name is Michael Rosen, and this is my group. You see that bloke over there? Him. That's George. And there's Mervyn, and that bloke over there. That's Harry. And then suddenly I noticed the sacks began to move. Someone climbed out, and it was Uncle Cucumber. Would you believe it? And he looks at us all fed up and he says, is that you, Michael? So I said, yes. I don't believe it, I really don't. Uncle Cucumber, how come you're here? And he said, we were taken a prisoner by the robot pirate. Then I said, yes, of course, but why? And he said, the bed tall of green wood began. But then it appeared, the roll that I read airship. And before we all knew it, they got me and Uncle Pickle. Then I said, blimey, what happened to the other flying Scotsman? And he said, I don't know, could be trouble. It was then Uncle Pickle appeared and he said, blimey, is that you, Michael? So I said, yeah. That's right. George said, okay, guys, but I think D4 and G3 had a plan. And he said, yeah, I said, it'll be great. So Uncle said, we can carry loads, if you remember Michael, when we had to carry the coffins at the funeral. And I cried. Then I said, yeah, you're strong, quite strong. And Uncle said, fair enough, but there's someone else, isn't there? It was then I noticed the little sack inside the cage and someone climbed out. And it was a fairy. She said, oh, hello. So everyone said, shh. And it was Fan the fairy. So I said, hey, Fan, long time no see. She said, is that you, Michael? So I said, yes, it is. Anyway, it was then D4 and G3 began to open the cells, and off we go. There we all were, underneath the window. Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber picked up us lot one by one. And there it was, the window. We all climbed down into the next room. It was then I noticed the guards. Fan the fairy said, okay, yeah, okay. And off she went, and we waited. Then she came back with the guns and the hat. Really good. And off we go to the door with a guard. And he said, and he slapped down the door really hard and fast, and suddenly we all heard a terrible noise. Then even more roll, but pirate appeared. And we ran and ran, and D4 and G3 began to shoot behind him. You'd hear roll that pirate going down behind you. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. It was then I noticed the new door. I'll tell you what I do. I took my lid off his door and began shooting away like mad at the roll that pirate. And then suddenly, a huge roll that pirate jumped down in front of the door. And he said, And the door blows up and we ran outside and there it was, platform 203 with a little ship. And we ran and jumped on our new ship. It was then Default and G3 said, we escaped. Wonderful. George said, I've got the Michael Rosen Map. Then I said, fantastic. And we looked to see. It was then we found out that we were close to the island of the Plums. The compass was pointing to the west. Then I told my crew all about our quest again. Fan the fair. We said, I'm very sorry, but I've got to go back to my people. Then I said, fair enough, I understand. And she said, thank you for your help, guys. And she took off and flew into the air. Then I said to Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber, and how about you? And Uncle Cucumber said, I think the other flying Scotsman will be okay without us, so we shall help you. Michael, okay? Yeah? So I said okay, and off we go. Not long after, Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber flew into the air and went up on top of the crow's nest and shouted out, ahoy! There it is, and yes, there it was, the island of the Plums, on its own, right in the middle of the sea. Fantastic. When we got there, we had a look at the Michael Rosen Map. The compass was pointing to the north. So I said, let's go. My group and Default and G3 said, then I said, perhaps, but let's go, and off we go. Not long after, there we all were. And then suddenly, Mervyn said, what's that? And we looked to see what there was. It was then I noticed the black smoke. Then, suddenly, someone appeared inside the smoke. All his clothes were black. It was then I noticed it was the guy in a black hood from the shop. And he took this gold blade and said, I shouted out, how do you know I'm a Rosen and who are you? And he said, and then suddenly I remembered this thing David Alexander said before. Now, my gang, let's report back to Agent Toenail Pizza. Then I said, I don't believe it, I really don't. What do you want then? And then suddenly, Toenail Pizza appeared behind me in a flash. I stopped still, feeling the feeling of the gold blade. Okay, I said, okay. Yeah, okay. And off we go, in a flash. There we all were, breathing very, very quietly. Everyone looked round. We were in this dark place under the island of the plums. My kind of base. Toenail Pizza said,
Hands in the air, is it the Silverman say dear?
downstairs. So it's down the stairs into a huge, terrifying room. Move in closer and closer. Then suddenly it appeared, and there it was on its own, right in the middle of the room. A treasure chest. It was huge. It was taller than me. Toenail Pizza said,
Rosen, house must be, yeah, it was why we left the house up here, and I do my best.
So I began stepping closer and closer towards the chest. Then suddenly Default and G3 pulled me back and pushed Toenail Pizza into the room, and Harry pulled the lever, and the door between us and Toenail Pizza closed really hard and fast. Slam! And straight away we noticed the gold blade began to cut through the door. Harry shouted out, "Quick, get out of here!" And we ran and ran, so it's rush upstairs into the hallway, running and running away like mad. Then suddenly all the doors closed. Oh no! And straight away a trap door slid open and we all fell deep down into the hole. Not long after, we all got up and looked round. It was as dark as night, except for the little lights, and there were horses all over the floor. Blimey. And then suddenly, Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber shouted out, "What's that?" It was then I noticed there was a man sitting there. He looked like a zombie. Then suddenly, a machine starts roaring next to this man. It starts up talking. Blimey, Mervyn said. That was terrifying. And there's Harry nearly crying. And here's me feeling bad, feeling worse than bad, terrible. Suddenly it appeared, a red mist. Then the horses go stand up. They just stand up. There was an awful yelling and crying. There was the noise of birds rattling and, oh no, this is horrible. Then there was the noise of guns. It was then Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber began to shoot magic. Then I took George, Harry and Mervyn away to the door, and then suddenly the zombie man came running. He screamed, "Ah, quick, Devil, quick, before we die." Oh no! Really big trouble. And here's me shooting with a flint off his horse. Suddenly a skeleton took George away. I shouted out, "No, George!" And I ran and jumped on the skeleton and I began punching it down really hard and fast. and it bangs against the floor really loud. Slam! George said, "Thank you, Michael. That was close." And then suddenly, the skeleton stopped still. And suddenly we all heard a terrible noise and this spooky voice talking. Suddenly, Toenail Pizza appeared and he raised his hand. Then I was pulled into the air like magic. I could not stop it. I darted across the room, closer and closer towards Toenail Pizza. Suddenly, it appeared on its own, the treasure chest. My hand began to move closer and closer towards the locket. I could not stop. Oh no, this is horrible. Then I unlock it. When I open the chest, I see magic plums. Hundreds and hundreds of them. So Toenail Pizza said,
Ja, als het weer heeft bespaard, we les het verhaal opgegeven.
Then Toenail Pizza took a magic plum out of the chest to look at it. And he said,
En als ik met les wat over de werk, staat niet bezitten. Slaap, eerst dan wat je nu. Vier, heb dus maar we les de niet meer als ze zijn even nog eens bespoor.
It was then I noticed George, Harry and Mervyn peeping round the corner of the chest. Then I asked, how come I can open the chest and you cannot? Why am I special? And he said,
Ja, als het weer heeft bespaard, we les het verhaal opgegeven. En als ik met les wat over de werk, staat niet bezitten. Slaap, eerst dan wat je nu. Vier, heb dus maar we les de niet meer als ze zijn even nog eens bespoor. Los zo snel als het gestaald niet ooit MacLeod zo ik zie we les de niet meer als ze zijn even nog eens bespoor. Nou en wezen ims hier dus der bespaard snel. Zo weer nu zijn is it man such men another self but oh boy you fear as to send you will see you would have already so nice gelad die weer de wijn is maar de weer maar nos misschien moet we zeker nice gelad die weer nu snel
then I said, but what's it got to do with me? And he said,
you know was lansing is not die een van de laatste minuut scout heel zo maar ik ben zo alles hè voor skes af net echt ja boos de steeks me als aan die sang ik zeg dan kan zie of ja when you work but you push strap met is het en ach nee was dat hier hier skin het zo geef en ach hoe ja en nooit nee maar honestly, I saw tiny lush. They're fine, I guess loaves of still questionable in the and all of that. See, that's the thing. They're good. Fine, if you're not holding it. Now, lost are gone. Now, lost are not loaves. Get soft, you know, good man loaves. See, that's the thing. But here, it's the same even do it. How is it? Loaves a week. See, it's still escapes Josh number. Loaves a week. See, here as the same even do it. How is it? Here as the same even do it. How is it? Now.
Then I said, I don't believe it, I really don't.
It's good. If you're not holding it, I lost so snel als het gestaald nooit wordt MacLeod zo ik zie. Het is dus niet beveren. Het wordt gaan wezen snel.
Would you believe it?
Het wordt gaan.
And then suddenly D4 began to shoot at Toenail Peter and said, Toenail Peter jumped out of the way. Then George, Harry and Mervyn appeared. Harry shouted, quick, Michael! And we ran and ran to the door. We all ran out the door and got away as fast as we could. There we all were, running for our lives. By the time we got outside, Toenail Peter appeared. Then, suddenly, Toenail Peter appeared behind Harry in a flash. Then, his gold blade cut into Harry's neck. Oh no! George and Mervyn screamed, Harry, no! Oh no! I shouted out, quick! Get out of here! Suddenly, the base blows up. Then, it appeared. The demon overlord, and it was absolutely huge. Then, the skeletons appeared as well. Then, suddenly, they appeared. If Ivers, hundreds and hundreds of them. And the bed tall between the natives and the undead began. Meanwhile, we were running away like mad. And then suddenly, Uncle Cucumber shouted out, I'm stopping Toenail Peter. I am stopping him. So Uncle Pickle said, I'm with you. Get out of here, boys. And they flew into the air towards Toenail Peter. Me, George, Mervyn and D4 and G3 were running really fast. And there it was, the beach with our ship and the roll boat. We all poured into the roll boat and off we go towards our ship roll wind really hard and fast. It was then we looked to see Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber fighting Toenail Peter, shooting magic. It was then I noticed Toenail Peter was on the floor. Look at that. Uncle Pickle and Uncle Cucumber shouted out to us, yes, get out of here, boys. Suddenly, no! And I cried. It was then we got to our ship and Toenail Peter was fighting the natives on the beach. So we took the chance and got away as fast as we could. Not long after, we were far away at sea. George was holding Harry's Liar's Guys game, cards, crying. So he didn't know what to say. Then I said, at first I thought Harry was a coward, but in the end he showed his true, brave side. George said, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Mervyn said, he was a nice man, Harry, and a good friend. I'm going to miss him. George said, mind you, the uncles were nice too. Then I said, yeah, they were some of my favourites. Then I said, that was a crazy journey. And Mervyn said, you're right, quite right. It was. Then I said, I think it's really bad news. They took all the magic plums. And then suddenly, George took this bag out of his pocket and he put it very carefully in my hand and said, that's not completely true. And we looked to see what was in the bag, and it was 3 magic plums. So I said, look at that. And then suddenly, George took the Michael Rosen Map out of his pocket. Fantastic. D4 and G3 said, so I said, of course, D4, we will. And the ship sailed off to the horizon. kaboom, 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 kaboom. CaptainPlums.